Okay. What? No companions? How's that not the best build in the game on S tier? No, not even in B tier? C tier? Companion druid in D tier? No, that's not okay. We're gonna fix that. Jokes aside, I do think Companion is possibly the best build in the game, and I do have it in S tier on my tier list. And I think I can make a pretty good case. Why? This is my tank version of the build. Now, if we can go back and check how much damage the first shred did on my first boss, that's 35 million, and I believe an 18 million. That's above 50 million damage for a tank version. My stats on the weapons and gear are not good. My glyphs are unupgraded. The build is full tank, other than having Petrify instead of having Debilitating Roar. We're gonna go over different versions of the build. I collaborated with Small Petting Zoo on this build. He was doing Companions build before, I was doing Shrednado, and we combined a lot of the knowledge that I had on Poison, Double Dippings, and his knowledge on pet builds and what he found to work with a Poison Creeper to collaborate and create two builds. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Let's talk about how double dipping works. The way the build worked, as you saw, I applied poison with my Poison Creeper, and then I procced it with something called Blurred Beast. Blurred Beast seeks out nearby poison enemies using Shred, and then deals 200% of the poison damage to them that was on the target. If it's on a two-handed weapon, it's 200%, otherwise it's 100%. The damage from Blurred Beast is applied on top of Shred, not inside Shred, on top of Shred. Which means that not everything will work. For example, ranks 2 Shred will not increase the damage of Blurred Beast. But Curse Kill damage will increase the damage of Blurred Beast. Also, you have to keep in mind that if most of the poison comes from Poison Creeper, Curse Kill damage and ranks to Shred don't do anything for that. Meaning that we do not double dip this. Ideally, we want as many sources of damage like T-Bolt's will, which is a flat amount of damage, it's increased damage, or on the Paragon board, on the first board, you have a rare node called Impel, it's 20% damage, which will apply to Shred, which will apply to Poison Creeper, and then will apply again to Blurred Beast. And this is the core of how to make the build work. Finding a balance on how to increase how much poison you apply, and then how to increase the damage from the poison explosion. That's why we have different versions of the build. I found a solution that allows the build to be consistently applying poison with Shred, meaning that I do not need Poison Creeper for killing T100 elites. I can do several million damage with just Shred, and that's fine by me, because that's already more damage than any build in the game, pretty much, even without Poison Creeper, which will then bypass the damage of any build, even bar builds, by several magnitudes, as I can spam Shred and do hundreds and hundreds of millions of damage. So what was my solution was to invest more in Shred. So ranks to Shred allows me to apply more poison thanks to the passive Toxic Claws. By having Toxic Claws on my amulet, rather than having ranks of the Call of the Wild, this means that now I get 45% from Toxic Claws of my Shred critical damage applied as poison on the target. So if Poison Creeper is down, I can still apply enough damage, enough poison damage to the target with just Shred and pop him without an issue. Several millions damage, plenty for T100, and you know, of course, Altides and whatever. I really like that this build is perfect on all sorts of situations, as it has the best clear speed in the game. With Shred, you blink around all the time, you reset the cooldown of your Metamorphosis, meaning that you can dash around continuously. It's extremely overpowered to like being able to reset your Metamorphosis and have blinks on CDs, pretty much. One of the key differences between this build and the full companion version is that to make ranks of Toxic Claws and Shred ranks be effective, I have to use possibly a glyph called Tracker. Tracker poison damage effects last 33% longer. Most people think that this increases how much poison is on the target, but what it does, it actually spreads the poison over a longer period of time. Looking kinda useless, but if you think about it, if your goal is to add poison with Shred for a couple of seconds, you want the poison to stay on the target as long as possible, which means that this will give you 33% more damage if you apply poison with Shred. So this is one of the things that you do not need for the Poison Creeper Burst build, but you do need for the Shred version that is more balanced. Overall though, one of the best things of all in this build is Guzzler, as this will give you increased damage, which is the cleanest form of damage that applies to all the forms of damage: Shred, Poison Creeper, and also Blurred Beast. This is the main mistake most people make when doing this type of builds, is not using Guzzler in their build. Something like also Ancestral Guidance will apply to all sources of damage, being extremely important to run. This build is far from being optimized, and it will still take a couple of updates, and I think we are maybe at 50% value. We can probably get this build to be twice as good as it is now, which is crazy because I strongly think it's the best build in the game already, as nothing can output this type of damage and this type of speed. Okay, here we are at the training dummy station, and we're gonna show how to play the build. We're gonna now do the full combo with Petrify. So we're gonna activate Tybalt's Will, we're gonna activate Godslayer Crown, and we're also gonna apply vulnerability and all our vampiric powers by dashing through the enemy. And then we're gonna apply only then Poison Creeper, Petrify, and Blurred Beast at the end. And that is one combo. As you saw before, I did not use Ravens for that combo because you have limited amount of time to do your damage because of Godslayer Crown. But this can be very strong, especially when doing Nightmare Dungeons. Also, especially if you're playing with a different vampiric power, this generates a ton of resources for you. And 8% crit chance is of course amazing. Now we're gonna do the combo without jumping through the enemy and applying our vampiric powers, which means we're gonna do losing about 4 times the damage. So you can see the difference. So I'm still gonna activate this, but the damage is a bit less, not by much, but you can see that she didn't get one shot. And just to show you that you do not need to be afraid if you mess up the combo. The damage, even if you mess it up, it's still ridiculous, enough that it doesn't really matter. I want to now show you a combo for speed farming, which we're gonna be losing quite a bit of damage here. But see what I did? I grouped up the enemies with the Godslayer Crown. I did not apply my curse first to them, meaning that we're gonna be losing half of our damage. That's okay though. You can apply your curse after you group them or not apply it at all, and it's still gonna be plenty of damage to one-shot anything, even in T100. But the main advantage is that they are all grouped and they all die instantly in just one shred. So if you want, if you're boosting, 4 people in an 80s, you need more damage, you can group them up with Poison Creeper, dash through them, apply your curses, vulnerability, and then shred. If you instead try to blink through them first and they are spread far away, then, you missed a lot of them with your curse. So I prefer honestly to just group them up first, jump through them, and then burst. The next one is kinda obvious, but I wanna try to kill at least one enemy before I use Debilitating Roar, because if I do, then my Hunter Zenith is gonna give me the cooldown back. So for example, now I've killed something, I have it up, I can kill something else, it's up again, and then I can kill another thing, and I will still have my Debilitating Roar. So you don't want to use your Debilitating Roar twice in a row, otherwise it's gonna be on cooldown, you wanna get kills in between. And let me tell you that 70% damage reduction plus 45 and healing is kinda broken. What about the other pet skills? The wolves, you never have to use them, and the raven is useful, and sometimes you can use it if you know, if you want. It really, I don't use it a lot, to be honest. I'm kind of lazy because the build is so overpowered, but it's 8% crit chance. If you want to use it, you can use it, but especially on bosses, I think it wastes time. It's only really good if you have need for mana and you're playing with the vampiric power for that. The last thing you can do, especially good if you're playing on controller, is make sure your buff from Ancestral Guidance is up before you burst the boss. So as you can see here, I have 60 mana spent. The next time I press Shred, it's gonna activate Ancestral Guidance. So if I were to fight a boss now, I would have 30% more damage. And also my Poison Creeper would have that. So that is something you can keep in mind, and you can try to have that buff activated for your Poison Creeper, so that Poison Creeper will at that point, you know, do more damage when that is up. All those little details really can add up, and honestly they're kind of crazy. You can really go crazy in optimizing how skilled you are at playing this build. But honestly, even if you're a grandpa like me, I'm 33 years old, and you just press Poison Creeper and just shred in, it's still fine. It still kills everything. Harder than any other class, so. Let's now go over the gear, the abilities, the Paragon board, the boons a little bit, and then at the end I will add a gameplay section where I show you different combos, different items, what they're good for, etc. So let's start with the basic build. For not speeding T100, for T100 you want to be a little bit more tanky. So for T100 I do not run Godslayer Crown, I would run a normal amulet with Disobedience or a defensive aspect instead. I like to run a rare chest unless I'm doing bossing, in which case you can run a Mad Wolf Glee if you want, or for Hell Tides, or for low tier content. Mad Wolf Glee is amazing, otherwise the rare chest. For my gloves, I instead like to have ranks to companions, and I like to have in here ranks to shred, critical strike chance, attack speed, and lucky hit chance or critical strike damage with werewolf skills is very good. Lucky hit chance is for your spirit boons, we're gonna go over those later. The most important unique in the build, in my opinion, is T-Bolt's Will, because it gives you flat damage and also because it gives you resources. But it's not necessary, we're gonna have a version without it, which is gonna run an aspect to get rid of your resource issues. But this is overall the most important item in the build, and you do run this even in T100. I like to have the Ghost Walker boots with Unstoppable, which will give you move speed and attack speed thanks to your vampiric power, which we're gonna cover later on. Spirit cost reduction, armor, all stats, or resistances instead of all stats would be valuable. I like that attacks reduce evade cooldown so that I can spam my blink. On my weapon, I am running Blurred Beast, of course. And in terms of stats, the stats aren't great. Close damage, damage to poison enemies would be a better thing to have than the stats I have. Critical strike damage with werewolf skills does not work with Poison Creeper. And yeah, it's just not great to have. Willpower and all stats do work for everything, but they're not the highest multipliers you can have. Still pretty good to have though. For my amulet, you have two options. You can go Toxic Claws, all companions. I really like that. But if you want to do just for bossing, you can have instead ranks of Call of the Wild. And you can put this one on. And maybe even have like pet damage or more offensive stats on the amulet. And I like to keep here, of course, my core skills deal additional damage for each active companion as the aspect, my Shepherd aspect. The Toxic Claw aspect is to be not reliant on Poison Creeper, and I've been really enjoying this build like this. For rings, we want to have the Storm Claw, we want to have damage to claws, critical strike chance is the most important stat in the game for this build, so always be sure to have high critical strike chance. Damage to claws applies to everything, HP is important. Lucky hit chance or resource generation is the best fourth stat to have. They're pretty much equally good depending on, you know, what you prefer. For ring, Hunter Zenith is a fucking monster. absolutely broken. You can run this in T100 dungeons and have your debilitating roar being never on cooldown pretty much. You use debilitating roar, it's back on cooldown because of Hunter's Zenith. It resets your next non-ultimate werebear skill, costs no resource and has no cooldown if you have killed something with a werewolf skill. Insane! Ranks to quick shift, ranks to heightened senses, amazing. Damage while shapeshifted, pretty good. Also 42%, fucking insane. And has crit chance. Holy shit, this is broken. Super OP because having no cooldown on debilitating roar means also to get more fortify and more healing. I fucking love this. It's my favorite thing about the build. Possibly, if you do not have that, you can run another ring. I have one with Edge Master, and if you do not have instead Thibault's Will, you can run the Umbral aspect and have resource generation from that, but yeah, that's gonna be on the non-unique build. The Godslayer Crown is amazing for bursting. You know, it's not easy to use. It also pulls the enemies, so very good for anything that is like tier 80 or below. I use this because you really don't die, and it's just super strong item overall. I really love the Godslayer Crown. For my boons, I like to have, of course, damage reduction from elites. Then, critical strike chance is a must-have, as crit chance is the most important stat in the game for the build. I do not run Iron Feather because for Nightmare Dungeons I really like to have Bolster and fortify myself consistently. You must play with Pack Leader, as critical strike have up to 20% chance to reset the cooldown of your companions. That's why Lucky Hit chance is a decent skill, decent stat to have, but not necessarily better than resource generation or critical strike damage. It's really good, but not necessary. We have Masochist for extra healing. As we do not run an ultimate, we do not need other types of boons. Abilities, let's go over. Our first passive is Ursian Strength. This applies to both Poison Creeper and Shred and Blurred Beast, meaning it multiplies everything twice. Super strong, 25% increased damage. We take every point we can in Quick Shift, Natural's Fortitude and Heightened Senses. This gives us damage reduction, fortify, and when shapeshifting you do very big damage, so when you do your combo of Poison Creeper and Shred, boom, huge damage. We take max points in Venom and Toxic Claws, so we do more damage, we apply more poison. This is not necessary if you run the companion, full companion version that does not rely on Shred. You would not need Toxic Claws ranks. We take max points in Poison Creeper, we take max points in Call of the Wild, 1 point in Raven, all the way down to Brutal Raven for more Ravens. But we take 0 points on Wolves, as we only really need them to exist. So we just have ranks to Wolves on our Amulet. I really like to play for Nightmare Dungeons with Debilitating Roar, we talked about it. Super OP, 70% damage reduction, hello. But you can also play with Petrify. For bosses, I suggest Petrify instead of Debilitating Roar, and you will just fucking destroy them. It's 50% multiplier, so why not have it for boss runs? For Blood Owl, we just take attack speed, or you can even take Spirit Generation if you have issues with that. Vigilance, 3 points, 1 point in Ancestral Fortitude, even though you could take ranks off Digitrade Gate and have more resistances if you need them. Of course, quick chance to close enemies, max ranks to Shred, and we take Primal Shred so that every Shred level procs Blurred Beast, as you need to jump for Blurred Beast to proc, so you need to get a little bit of distance and then jump back in. These ranks to Shred are not needed if you're gonna play the full burst version. Then Wild Impulses, your core skill deal increased damage. This applies to Blurred Beast and applies to Shred, meaning that I can get more poison with Shred and then multiply that with, of course, my Blurred Beast. Finally, you just take Storm Strike, even though you do not need it. but you will use this if you play the non-unique version. The Paragon board is gonna be a massive endeavor, and it will get changes daily for a while, as figuring out exactly what is the best tankiness and source of damage that applies to everything. So I'm not gonna go too much over the Paragon, because this will change. You will keep it updated on the Mobilytics website. Every day you can see what gets changed on the Paragon board and where we are at with that. But of course, you know, Lust for Carnage will be there. And yeah, all the good stuff. This is really where I think most of the improvement for the build will come from. I think we have 40% more to go. It's gonna be wild when the build is maximized. And especially when my glyphs are finally leveled. I only have high level Guzzler, not really high level on anything else. Every other glyph is pretty much rank 15. Let's go over the vampiric powers. First of all, we have Sanguine Brace. 8% crit chance and give you Fortify. This is something you will take out of the build if you do not have Thibault's Will. Instead, you're gonna be playing Feed the Coven to get more resources, and it's also nice, more damage. Very cool. Now, Metamorphosis, OP, you get Unstoppable. When you get Unstoppable, you proc Thibault's Will. But also, by applying Vampiric Curse to your enemies, you will apply another Vampiric power, Prey on the Weak. You make them vulnerable, and vulnerable enemies take 16% more damage. This is gonna be part of our combo that is really not necessarily needed to hit, to kill stuff, but for bosses, it's really cool. We have Flowing Veins, 60% increased damage over time to targets that are affected by Vampiric Curses. So you have a 60% and then a 30% pretty much multiplier if they are cursed. Meaning that it's really important to apply your curse on bosses, but as you can see later on, the damage will be fine without that. Ravenous is just a massive amount of attack speed you get based on your movement speed. In terms of extra gear I would have for this build, I would say 3 items extra that you can bring around if you want. The least important one is a Super Burst Amulet without Toxic Claws. If you want to have this, I would suggest you go full damage on the stats and just have fun on bosses with it. Not very important, as you explode bosses even with just the Toxic Claw Amulet. Then a full defensive helmet to replace Godslayer if you want to push T100. I will use that. With ranks to Poison Creeper, you recover a lot of damage. It's really nice. And if you want to go for super speeds like 60s and Eltites, I would say Madwolf Glee, super crazy good item to have to replace your rare chest. And I will always keep my Thibault's Will and my Hunter Zenith, unless you're playing the non-unique build, of course. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you guys again on the next video.